Welcome to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug Coward, along with Daniel Madelon of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring. What's up, man? How are you?
What's going on? Doing well.
We have a quite the lineup today on the show. We have Brian Whidby. He is the Georgia Bureau of Investigation Special Agent in charge of Special Investigations, or Special Agent in charge of Special Investigations and the Cold Case Division. That's a mouthful. Do you print that on a card, or is it too much to go on one card?
Too much on one card.
Just got a bunch of initials.
Special Investigations.
There you go. Okay. All right. There we go. And then we have Christi Canner, GBI Assistant Special Agent in charge, which Christi also sounds intense. I mean, that sounds like you got quite a job in front of you daily. Am I right about that?
Some days.
Some days? Yeah.
Days.
Yeah, those days seems like it would be like me on a tough day. You know, I fold under the pressure, and when a tough day comes around, like you rise to the occasion. Am I right about that?
I have a great support system.
There we go. Well, I like that. That's smart. I like the way you did that. So, Special Agent in charge Whidby began his law enforcement career in '97. Prior to employment with the GBI in 2001, assigned to the GBI Region 8 Cleveland Field Office, primarily investigating violent crimes until 2013, then promoted to Special Agent in Charge, the ASAC. This feels very military all of a sudden when you start using acronyms, right?
A little bit,
It does, for a guy that was in the Navy. To the GBI Region 10 Atlanta Field Office, served as ASAC for Georgia Information Sharing and Analysis Center, the Georgia Fusion Center from 2018 to 2020, and then the ASAC to the GBI Region 8 Cleveland office from 20 to 22. Goodness, what a list of things that you've been a part of. Did you expect that as a young man that this is where you'd end up? I mean, because everybody dreams of whatever their job's going to be. Was this part of your dream?
Not really. I just sort of fell into it. It's just it piqued my interest going into college, and finished up college and got lucky. Got an internship with a local department in Metro Atlanta. And got hired on with them for a couple of years. Worked locally, worked the road locally, and really wanted to get out of that car and do, have a little more freedom of what I'm doing and hours I was working and things like that. I had a young family at that time, and trying to get off the shift work a little bit. Little did I know that the GBI would be even worse for that, because I'd be getting called out in the middle of the night. But it's been great. It's been great. And like you said, started off in North Georgia and Cleveland, where, I think most agents, you think of Metro Atlanta, you think the big cities, but for GBI agents, you learn your craft. You make your bones in the small counties, in the small cities in North Georgia and South Georgia. That's where you're working. Yeah, that's where you
have to do a little bit of everything.
That's where you're working most of your violent crimes.
Yeah.
In those places.
And then you were promoted to the Special Agent in charge of the GBI Special Investigation, responsible for the supervision of the staff, assigned to the statewide unit that conducts both public corruption investigation and cold case investigations. You talked about school. Graduated from Georgia State University, bachelor's in science with a degree in criminal justice in '97, master's of public administration. Columbus State University in 2017. Columbus State University got a good baseball team down there.
They do.
They're always so stinking good. Graduate of the Georgia Law Enforcement Command College and the FBI National Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Goodness gracious. Then it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, because that's close to the federal folks up there, right?
It is. So the FBI National Academy is something that's offered through the FBI. See a lot of, they call it law enforcement executives, basically. It's, the supervision then can go to that. It's a 10-week course. You stay in Quantico. It's a lot about networking and getting to know others around the country and internationally. So I have a list I can go on. If I have if I need a question answered in Kansas,
You know who to call.
I know who to call.
Yeah.
I just go on the server and find somebody in Kansas, submit to FBI NA, and
Wow.
give them a call. So it was
Seems
a great
handy.
opportunity. Yeah, it is. It's very handy.
I could
Very
use that
handy.
with like a mechanic.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know, just get me a good mechanic. If I could get the Rolodex for that. I don't know about you, Daniel, but I need his Rolodex.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a bad one to have.
No doubt. We'll talk about now Christi Canner, GBI Assistant Special Agent in charge, responsible for supervision of special agents and others within the Office of Special Investigations Unit, responsible for criminal election-related investigations, public corruption investigation, and a newly formed cold case unit. Goodness gracious, how do you do that in a day? That seems like there's a lot there. Do you run across like days that aren't really busy?
Not a sprint, right? It's a marathon.
Yeah, right, absolutely. When you were a young woman, or even a young girl, was this on your radar screen? Did you know you wanted to work in policing work, but ultimately the GBI?
So I actually went to school for criminal justice and computer science, hoping that I'd get into cyber forensics is what my initial goal was. But then I ended up,
Goodness.
and then I ended up going. I started an internship with a local police department with the campus police, actually, and kind of caught the bug. It was just a lot of fun. It was, fast paced. It was just fun, and being able to help, obviously, the community. And then that led me to policing, and I had a supervisor, really great supervisor, who knew my true love was going to be investigations, and he recommended me to go to the GBI.
That's cool.
And so that's how I ended up here.
Is that something that has to be done? Please forgive my ignorance, but is that something that you have to have a recommendation to go to the GBI?
No, not at all. No. So he just knew my personality, I think, well enough, and he said,
That's awesome.
you'd be really good at working at the GBI. He knew, GBI is extremely thorough in their paperwork. They're very in depth, and their investigations are very, top tier. And so he said, I think you would
fit
really
the bill.
enjoy it.
You fit the bill. I love it.
And
That's
so-
really awesome. So you started out 2010 with the Douglasville Police Department, became a special agent in 2012, crime scene specialist in 2014, and then post-certified instructor and member of the Georgia International Association for Identification. The GIA. Wait, hang on. Did I say that right? GAI. I got it all backwards. GAI. Goodness. I mean, the acronyms are amazing with y'all. Y'all do some incredible acronyms. I mean, I can't keep up with them. But graduated from West Georgia, bachelor's in science and criminology, and as you mentioned, computer science, and then went on to the University of Tennessee for National Forensics Academy. Up there, a big Vols fan or no? Maybe not. No. Who's your team?
Georgia.
How about them dogs? Okay, all right. Make sure we're all on the same page here. That's all.
Yeah, she can't work for me and be a Tennessee.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have none of those days, as we have an autographed Georgia helmet sitting here in the room, in Jersey too. It seems like we have some Georgia connections around here at Dickey Broadcasting and Extra 106.3. Daniel, do you oftentimes work with the GBI over at a Second Chance?
Not really. I mean, normally it's on their side of the investigation stuff. I mean, but on the bonding side, no, not particularly.
Yeah. So and is there overlap with like the local municipalities ever?
Oh yeah, they call the GBI. I mean, well, look, if you see on the news, the GBI has been called in for, if it's like a death in the jail or like, I mean, that's just something that's coming to the top of my head. But I mean, a lot of the sheriffs that I know around the state obviously lean on GBI, which I think is great. I mean, some of the newer sheriffs that came in were very forthcoming with wanting to lean on the GBI, and I was like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, as far as transparency goes, because there's a lot of people challenging law enforcement and second guessing. We went through that time period where that was just crazy, and so I mean, very useful and stuff like that.
You know what I know about the GBI? That they walk out on the field with Kirby Smart. That's what I know about the GBI. And you laugh. Like, I would imagine, if I had to guess, that's probably most people's knowledge, or interaction. Hopefully, that's most people's interaction, is just seeing them on TV and not having to interact personally. But I would imagine, though, when people see y'all out, it's because the GBI always looks so sharp, the uniforms are so distinct. What's the interaction with the public like, usually?
Sure. Well, I have to go back a little bit. That's the State Patrol.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Oh, my gosh. State Patrol. So, what am I saying? So I know nothing about the GBI. So right there. Yeah, just right over the top of my head. You're right. So what's the relationship with the public like at the GBI?
I think it's good. I hope it is. We try to, maintain that that stance of, hey, we're open, we're transparent, come talk to us if need be. But the general I guess how we interact with the public. Normally you're really not seeing a GBI agent unless something bad's happened, right? Yeah. We don't particularly have a uniform. We have a shirt that says GBI on it.
Sure.
If you see somebody out working a crime scene or somebody's been called out, but normally we're in, regular, casual dress or something like that. So, GBI is strictly major felony cases. Yeah. So, and we assist the local agencies, like you alluded to earlier. Basically, we're free labor for the sheriffs, for the local police departments to come out and help them if need be.
Yeah,
I take that back. We do. So yes, active cases that we have on bond, absolutely. If there's new crimes, major felonies like he's talking about, some of the major stuff, or if we have a person on monitor, or they just want information, right? So GBI will reach out to us and say, hey, you've bonded this guy out 4 times since 2020. What information do you have if they're looking for him? Which, of course, we always, I'm a big believer in helping law enforcement and stuff like that. But yeah, no, GBI is great.
That's fascinating. I'm so fascinated by what y'all do and know nothing. Again, like I said, know absolutely nothing about it. So when we come back, I want to talk about the GBI cold case unit, like when it started.
Sure.
Some of the things that, the cold cases when it comes to like homicides and missing persons that, obviously, you can't go into detail, but the things that you're doing right now, because I would only imagine that people would be fascinated, just like me, to hear about some of this stuff when we continue with Brian Whidby and Christi Canner of the GBI here on Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. Welcome back to Back Your Blue on Extra 106.3. My name is Tug Coward, along with Daniel Madelon of A Second Chance Bail Bonds and A Second Chance Monitoring. We also have Brian Whidby. He is Georgia Bureau of Investigation Special Agent in charge of Special Investigations and Cold Case Division. That's a mouthful. Goodness gracious. And then Christi Canner, GBI Assistant Special Agent in charge. When we stopped during the break, we were just talking about how what y'all do is almost like a TV show, and then we get to talking a little more, but it kind of is. And maybe if you've seen Will Trent, some of those shows like that. Why is the work y'all do so fascinating and shows up on TV like that? Do you think?
I don't know, but people do have a fascination with it, and they, it's entertainment value to it, I guess, as well. But it is interesting. I've been doing this for going on 28 years now, so it's got to be a little bit interesting to stay with it that long.
To stick with it, yeah.
Not many people stay around that long.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's always something different. It's always something new. So I think that's part of the fascination with it is, you never know what you're going to get. Each day's different. Each case is different, and you meet a pretty large cross section of the public.
Yeah, of course,
doing this kind of work.
No doubt. Christi, you said that in your spare time you actually help some of because Atlanta's the Hollywood of the South. You actually help some of the people that are putting together TV shows make things more realistic. How did you get involved with that, and what do you do?
So another crime scene specialist that I've worked with for years recommended me to go do that, and that actually was a recommendation to join, help the show, and it's in their crime scene perspective. So if they have blood stains in their scene, how to make them look more real, or they're collecting evidence or processing evidence, or sometimes even like the chases in the scenes, just to make it look more realistic of what a police officer would actually do. So sometimes if it's, somebody's running down the hallway, at what point do you draw your weapon? Those types of questions. Cow. So we're there just to kind of help them make it more realistic.
I see this, and the reason I brought this up is my wife watches a TV show called Virgin River. I don't know if y'all know this one or not. So it's awful. Don't watch it if you've not.
My wife watches it. I do not.
Yeah. You've done yourself a favor by not watching it. So my brother-in-law, retired Air Force. I have another brother-in-law, retired Marine Corps. I've got an Army. I was Navy. I didn't retire. I just spent 4 years. But there was a scene at the end of this season where the two main characters are getting married, and one is in a military, a Marine uniform, and my brother-in-law picked it apart. That's the only enjoyment he got out of the entire TV show, is saying, that wouldn't happen, that's not real, that's not within regs. I mean, he was just tearing it apart. So they need somebody like you, Christi, to be able to guide them and point them in the right direction, because people who are in the military, and I would imagine people in the GBI or other organizations, other police organizations, when they see something like that on a TV show, they'd be like, that's not the way it would work. That's not the way it would happen. So making that more realistic is such a cool thing, because most of the time it's not.
Very true.
Yeah. They get it wrong, Brian, more than they ever get it right.
Yeah, like I said, my wife watches that show, but she watches the other shows, the police shows, the murder shows, the things like that, and she can't watch them with me because, like you said, we're picking them apart. And,
right.
Especially, they're walking into a crime scene and it's dark in a house with flashlights.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you walk by 4 light switches. Turn the lights on, dude.
It's hard to pick up on evidence if you don't look at it.
How about just turn the lights on?
That's right.
It's little stuff like that.
That's so true. I remember. You remember the movie Seven?
Oh, yeah.
With was it Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman?
Yeah.
Every room was dark. It was always flashlights and it was always raining. You're like, come on, dude, flip on a light, man. What are you doing?
Turn the light switch on.
So Daniel, you've probably seen stuff like this before on television.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not an expert on anything, much less policing, and probably would have thought that. Hey, man, this light switch right there, maybe turn that thing on and see what you can find. I bet we can solve this case quicker if we're able to see. I don't know, maybe. Let's talk about the history of the GBI cold case unit. When did it start?
So July 23 is when we stood up the unit.
Of 2023, like just
recently.
Dude,
yeah. We're like a year and a half old.
Yeah, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, we're a year and a half old. So, the GBI, the way we're set up, we have 15 regional offices throughout the state, and then specialized units as well, drug offices, child crimes, human trafficking, things like that. But all the homicide cases, all the death investigations are worked out of the regional offices, the 15 regional offices throughout the state. And the GBI does not close unsolved homicide cases. So they're still open. So we have homicide cases from 1970, going forward in some of our offices. And we saw the need for it, just the funding wasn't there yet, right? But, and like I said earlier, a lot of my time was spent in a regional offices working those homicide cases. And it ebb and flows. It's, when you're a working agent in the office, you can see you'll get 2 or 3 homicides in a row and you're working those and you're spending all your hours and time on those cases. And then you'll get in that downturn where it's not that busy. So then you're able to pick up those unsolved cases and look at those, start working those. But the problem is, you look at them, you refresh yourself, you start working them, you start doing interviews, and then you get a new one. Well, you got to put the unsolved down, right? So because you got to work the one in front of you. So we were fortunate at the GBI. The Coleman-Baker Act was passed, and driving force behind the Coleman-Baker Act were the families of 2 homicide victims in the state of Georgia, Rhonda Sue Coleman and Tara Baker. Rhonda Sue Coleman, high school student in South Georgia, who was tragically killed 20 years ago, and then Tara Baker, again, about 20 years ago. She was a law student at UGA. So their families got together with some members of the legislature, put together a cold case law. So it's the Coleman-Baker Act. Luckily with that, and we thank the legislature and the governor for putting this together and signing this into law, along with this mandate came the funding for the GBI to stand up the cold case unit. So we were able to stand up the cold case unit. We have 10 agents statewide working cold cases with supervision, with the intelligence staff working with us as well. So, and these agents, a lot of the supervision out of the regional offices aren't happy with me right now because I took some really good agents for this, and you have to have that. These are agents that are proven, They know how to work homicide cases. They rose to the top. They were selected specifically for their, I guess their acumen in working these kind of cases. Sure. So we were lucky to get a good staff, good agents working these cases for us.
Is it common for, I guess, around the country? Is this new for most agencies, or is it Georgia was a little late to the game, or how do you see that?
I don't want to say late to the game, but there are other state agencies that have it. A lot are. It's the new thing, really. Is working the cold cases and actually having a specific unit that does that. There's a lot of advancement that has come along with forensic evidence technology that's allowed us to try to solve some of these cases. Yeah. So not really late to the game, just because we've always worked them, right? Yeah. We just hadn't had that specialized unit to do it. Yeah. Now we have, and we're full speed ahead.
That's unbelievable. Last year, or in the last 18 months, what has been the solve rate? Or is that a silly question to ask?
No.
How many have you figured out now that have gone cold? And
so it's a cold case. It's cold for a reason, right? Because it's not easy. It's not easy to solve.
Sure, of course. I don't expect the number to be big, but I mean, just any.
Yeah. So we do have one, and we'll talk about it, but I want to sort of go back a little bit to how we get these, right? So the public and victims' families can request a Coleman-Baker Act review from the GBI or their local agency. When they do that, we look at it, we accept that case. If it's a GBI case, we're going to accept it, right? But not only, we're taking cases that haven't been requested through the Coleman-Baker Act, they're just GBI cases, right? So we've gone to the regional office and said, what do you have? Let's see what you have. Let's go through it. Let's take it. But it takes time. You're talking about minimum probably 6 months for that agent to pick up the case, to read it, to digest it, to understand it, to go through the evidence before they're even doing the first interview, right? So it's a long process.
I can only imagine.
To get through it. Now, since that 18 months, one of the cases that we picked up immediately, well, two of them were Rhonda Sue Coleman, Tara Baker. Mm-hmm. We had some really good luck with the Tara Baker case out of Athens. We got it assigned, worked with our regional office in Athens, worked with the Athens-Clarke County Police Department, and the GBI's forensic division. We were able to solve that case, make an arrest after over 20 years.
Wow.
And that... I don't remember exactly when we arrested him, Christi. It was back late summer.
It was May 9th, I believe.
Yeah, so May 9th of last year. So.
With the exact date? That's a good pull there.
It was a big day.
I can't remember my anniversary. You're pulling cold cases, It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's a big day. I mean, you think about it, Tara Baker, she's one of the namesakes of the law. We were able to pick that case up, go through it, find a couple of things, run with it, and actually make that arrest.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
What was the mood like in the GBI when that happened? I mean, you had to be beaming with pride. There had to be lots of pats on the back, and holy cow, we did it.
Oh, yeah. It was great. But again, it was a partnership with our regional office, Athens-Clarke County.
Of course. All the people involved.
Yeah. I mean, everybody was ecstatic. Everybody was happy.
That's amazing.
For us, just bringing that... closure's a strange word, but actually
that's what it is.
It's some closure for the family. They're never going to get over the loss of their loved one, but bringing some closure, letting them know that that we're still here, still working on the case, and
still care,
and still care. Right. Absolutely.
I mean, that's the biggest thing I would imagine. Christi, you can tell me what you think, but people respond to the fact that you cared enough to try, and even if there's others that don't finish this way and they stay cold. The fact that you cared enough to try, I would imagine, is more than most of those families have been able to experience when it comes to the person that they love, that they lost.
Sure. Yeah, I think, and one of the things that we really push for is communication with the family. I mean, that is one of the biggest things. Our agents, when they get the case, they're in communication with the family, letting them know. And it's not always a good news situation, right? We might call them up every couple of weeks or once a month and say, hey, we're still here. We're still working. We don't have anything yet, but we're still in communication. And I think that that's key for the families, knowing that we're still working this. We're still, trying everything that we can. And that also goes to, I feel like, our process that we have created in our unit is fantastic. The way that we take cases, the thorough review, which is why we have senior agents, doing these. They know kind of what to look for, what's fallen through the cracks maybe, and then looking at all of the evidence. And we also have taken some senior crime scene specialists from throughout the state too, which also didn't make some folks happy.
Yeah,
but having these senior, crime scene folks also to be able to look at this evidence and see what's been done, what hasn't been done, what can still be done, and then in partnership with obviously our crime lab, they can look and say, hey, we've got new technology here. We might be able to try this, or we might be able to try that. And so they are really, a significant part of, us trying to get these cases worked too.
We're going to come back to process in a minute, because Daniel, I bet y'all have a serious process from start to finish on how you do bail bonds and how you do monitoring.
Yeah, and we have to find these people also, because if not, then I'm writing a big check to whichever government agency.
Yeah.
So, and we've had only 2 that have gotten away forever that I'm still looking for.
You got cold cases.
Yes.
You got your own cold cases.
Unfortunately, I do, and I'll never forget these people, because it just really irritates
Seared
me.
in your mind forever and ever. That's amazing. How did you come up with your processes? But I know you've been at it a long time, but is it trial and error, or did you
we went in-house, where most bonding agencies around the country outsource their investigators, where we have in-house investigations. And then we work obviously with marshals and just different people throughout Metro Atlanta and stuff like that. But I'm all about, because if the person doesn't show up for court, then there's no case. So then the investigators have wasted years, time, sometimes months, hours, whatever it is, to bring the case. So my job is to make sure they show up. Not everybody has that same thought process, but I'm a big believer in that. So we try to make sure these people are there, so that way when these investigations are happening, it's not for nothing.
Anybody that doesn't buy into that process, man, I'm questioning.
You'd be surprised.
I'm just saying. Let's go back to process for y'all. When you talked about the process of, did y'all come up with a process, or was it just wisdom that you've gained over the years? How was it developed?
Right.
The process of would you call it prosecuting a cold case or investigating a cold case? That'd be the better way to put it.
Yeah, I think it's the investigation. There's been some tried and true methods that the GBI has used for years. We took those. We came up with our own ideas. I'm not ashamed to say it. We stole some ideas from other agencies.
For sure.
If that's what it takes, then that's what we'll do. Like I said, the GBI had a process of what we do. We looked at what other agencies are doing, talked to them, incorporated that into what we could do, what we were doing, what worked best for us. And a lot of that is, initially that initial read of the file, digesting that. And one thing I stressed and wanted to stress is the evidence. Looking back at what evidence do you have? What evidence do you still have? Where is it? Let's find it. Right?
Is that a problem?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, it's a problem. It can be, because you think about it, some of these cases happened in the 80s, right? Some go back to the 70s.
So how do you process that stuff? Like, let's say it's DNA or whatever it is you guys are running back now.
Right. So, and that's the thing. You got to find it first, right? Let's just say we have a sweater, from a victim. We've got to find it first. Then we've got to look at it and see, where has it been? How's it been kept? And then it all leads to one thing I wanted to stress was incorporating the state lab, the GBI crime lab, into our investigations and bringing them with us, sitting down with them one-on-one. This is what we have. What can we do with it? Because they're the experts in the scientific part of it. And so that's one thing we do, is we find all the evidence, categorize all the evidence. This is what we have. Sit down with the lab and go, okay, what can we do now? There's things that our lab can do. There's certain things our lab can't do, and we're able to send that to private labs as well. So we're partnering with some private labs as well for what they can do that maybe our lab can't do at the moment. Some of that is just technology that these private labs have that we don't necessarily have right now. Some of it's, cost restraints that we can use outside labs.
Okay.
Because, the GBI crime lab, they service the entire state, right? Sure. Not just us. So
they're relatively busy, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. So, sometimes to move to the front of the line, we might use a private lab, or, we might try to pull some strings to get to the front of the line with our lab. But really partnering with our crime lab, they've been great. And going through the evidence of what's there, because the big thing now is, and you mentioned it earlier, is DNA. Not every case has got DNA in it, unfortunately, if it did,
or the evidence isn't valuable or usable.
Right, maybe it's not usable anymore. Yeah. Right, so a lot of these cases come down to the agent and who's working it, and that's why we were so selective of who joined the unit, because. Yeah. This is a self-motivated, self-driven kind of investigation because it's 20 years old, right? Yeah, that one family member's out there that's pushing you, but it's not in the news anymore. It's 20 years old. You've got to connect with the victim. You've got to connect with the family and really push yourself to, to do the investigation and to do it right.
Have you ever been on the cusp of what you thought was solving a cold case? And it came down to, like, the DNA evidence wasn't kept well and it had been moved around or whatever the reason, you didn't feel confident that you could use this because of how it was handled way back when. And you're like, if they would have just saved that one piece of evidence, I know this would have been solved.
Yeah.
You've been there?
Yeah, it happened 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Yeah, so we got some results back and we looked at it and we were all happy and we took it to the lab and talked to the lab and they're like, yeah, not so much.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah,
all of that work.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like you're on, like, you can see the finish line, and then somebody just takes the finish line and takes it away from you. Yeah, the finish line is gone.
Yeah, just destroyed it. Yeah, absolutely. But it was not, those were the processes back then, you know, and in 1985, I wasn't in this business then, but in 1985, if these guys knew what was going to happen in 2025, you just don't.
They would have done it differently.
See the
there's no way to know. There's no way to know what you don't know.
Yeah, right.
And the changes in technology.
Who knew 15 years ago that law enforcement was going to be using genetic genealogy to track down suspects? Very few, if any.
Explain that a little bit, because I bet people have heard that on a TV show or have heard that somewhere but don't really know what that is. Can you explain it?
Well, I'll give you the layman's terms of it. The Cliff Notes. I mean, basically, it's if you have DNA, right, first of all, and you have unknown suspect DNA. So let's say we have a murder with a sexual assault, and the suspect left his or her DNA there in that sexual assault. You can take that DNA. It's unknown. You run it through our normal systems, and it doesn't come back to anybody. So this person's never been in prison where they had to, they were mandated to give up their DNA, right? So it's not hitting in CODIS where we keep our where DNA is stored for violent felons. So there are private labs that will develop that DNA into what they call a SNP profile, and that can be used for markers for genetic genealogy. So you can build out a family tree and get to your right suspect.
Holy cow.
Now, that is a laborious, long process.
Yeah, it's not done in a 30-minute TV show.
No, it's done over...
like they do it in a 30-minute TV show.
Probably 30 months. And it depends on how good the DNA is, how good the markers are in the DNA. And, there's certain folks where it works well at. There's certain folks where it doesn't, and it just takes extra time. And you're talking about, you'll start with a